Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for our webinar. Before I start showing any of the slides, I'd like to introduce Heather and myself. I am an adjunct professor in the Communication Sciences and Disorders Department at the University of Iowa. I'm also a co-founder of Foundations in Learning and the Chief Academic Officer. And for the past 2 decades, we have partnered with cognitive scientists and reading researchers to develop tools that actually provide access to literacy for all children, especially those who struggle. And our really big effort has been to try to integrate the science of learning and the principles that we know help children retain and retrieve information so that they can generalize it, it becomes automatic, and all of those are really important pieces for early literacy. So it has given us a great opportunity to work with school partners, and that is how we met Heather Williams, who I will introduce now. She is the principal of LaSalle Catholic Elementary School. She has been the principal for 5 years. Prior to that, she was a teacher for 6 years, mostly, and I understand, Heather, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you were in 4th and 5th grade for most of that time, and really loved that, teaching that grade level. And then she moved to administration, where she's been for 7 years and principal of this school for the past 5 years. I think what you will see in the discussion is that she is a fierce advocate for all children. She finds out where each child is, and she works religiously with her teachers and her school leaders, with her students and her parents, to create an environment in which every child is successful and is a lifelong learner. And we have been really impressed with her energy, and I must say her problem-solving skills. Once she recognizes a problem, she goes after it 100%. And we have been really, really proud to be a partner with her, and we've invited her to join us today because I think she brings great insights to the problem that we're all trying to solve right now. And I'll just share our screen and we'll get going. So our webinar today is focused on why 4th graders are struggling with reading and what we can do about it. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have questions as we're going through the discussion and presentation, please enter them on the Q&A function on Zoom. We are recording this and we will share it afterwards. So, and we will make time for discussion at the end. We'll try to move through the presentation in a way that gives us plenty of time to answer your questions. So I have already done introductions, and what we're dealing with these students who are continuing to struggle in 4th grade is the aftermath of COVID. And today's presentation will be sort of in 3 parts. In the first part, I'll just review, and it'll be a pretty high-level review on some of the impacts that were caused by COVID in the pandemic. Then I will talk about the impact specifically on early reading skills, and then hopefully make obvious how some of the principles from learning science can make a significant impact for these youngsters. And then we'll talk about how more of the same just won't work. And we'll transition to Heather, and she's going to talk about what realistic expectations for students, teachers, and parents are now in this time, and how she has organized an integrated system. She's reorganized and rethought, I think, the way her school works at a school level to make it efficient and effective. And I think it'll be really enlightening for all of us to hear what she's doing to make sure that every single one of her children becomes a reader. So I think everybody is, the findings keep coming in, but it's really clear that the current fourth grade cohort suffered the greatest impact. These were the youngsters who were in kindergarten when they went home and their learning was disrupted in the spring of 2020. And there are a couple of ways that we can look at the impact. One is by just looking at the nation's report card, the National Assessment Educational Progress Report. And the most recent came out in 2022. The NAEP is administered every 4 years, and we get a picture of the health of the nation's educational status, and a national look. And the Annie Casey Foundation actually summarized the NAEP report for 2022, and I've just picked a few key findings, but 42 states saw an increase in the number of fourth graders who were below proficiency. Racial and ethnic disparities have widened since the pandemic, and a number of students of color are not proficient in reading, and that increased during the pandemic. And while the NAEP provides a national picture every 4 years, it doesn't allow for a direct comparison of results between and within districts in the state and then across states to track annual performance data. So Harvard and Stanford collaborated in this wonderful collaboration, and I would recommend that if you don't know the Education Recovery Scoreboard website, that you go there. It is constantly being updated with findings that can help educators, can help parents, and because they have such large data sets, we're able to see patterns. But this collaboration actually was designed so they could scale these performance scores so they could make these comparisons within districts across years rather than waiting for the NAEP to come out with a 4-year report. So even though this is not by any means everything that happened or that has left an impact on learning loss, it did impact in very unprecedented ways, losses in both reading and math. All demographics and student subgroups were impacted, all demographics. And we'll be talking to Heather, and hers is a very typically high-performing school, and she'll talk about what changes she saw with her students. The students from higher poverty districts and those with learning challenges and English learners were at the greatest risk. The disruption of life, and some of that was sickness. Children lost family members, parents were working at home, or they were losing jobs. All of this disruption caused great familial stress, worry, uncertainty, anxiety, and we have many of these children who still suffer from mental illness. And there was definitely a disconnection from the social emotional learning that happens at school. So that's sort of like just a quick review, and I know that all of you, it's 4 years now, but I wanted to give that review because we're talking about these fourth graders and what kinds of problems that we're seeing. And a lot of what we're able to think and look at is what the consequences of remote learning were now, looking backwards. The lack of in-person teacher instruction and peer interactions caused great social and emotional disruption to learning and reading. Students that did not have good internet connection, and there was a lot of anxiety surrounding the online lessons for many students, decreased attention, focus, and learning. Reading instruction, we're now seeing, was compromised with primarily computer-based programs without that teacher feedback and nurturance. That cycle of Skill growth and knowledge that happens with instruction, practice, and feedback was completely disrupted. And we saw decreased opportunities to actually use and generalize skills, which impacts retention and retrieval. So we have children with gaps in ways that we have not seen before. And they're not predictable gaps because each of those districts and those families were all in different situations. But the fourth graders are in urgent need, and especially for that population of students we talked about who are already at high risk. So the education recovery scorecard presents some really devastating news if we don't impact these students with effective and immediate intervention. Their success in secondary education is being compromised. Dropout rates will increase. Their integration into an information-driven society is at risk, and their future earnings and life success. So what, and Sean Reardon from Stanford is the one who every time I check in and look to see what new articles are out or what new findings are up, repeated is more of the same is not enough. So what we did before the pandemic wasn't good enough for many of these children anyway, and we need to address that. But to actually put the spotlight on this longstanding problem and try to figure out how we can move forward is really, really important. The word flight screening tool, which is free to districts, identifies whether students are proficient in automatic word recognition. So it's not just early foundational skills, including decoding and encoding or sound symbol relationships. We're actually trying to see if we can see where their deficits are and whether or not they have reached automatic word recognition. So I want to just show you, we collected data this fall on about 2,600 students in elementary school, beginning in this fall and continuing through last month. Many districts use the screener for their struggling readers. So this isn't a sample of all their students. This is a sample of where their struggling readers fall out. But it is a very useful way to quickly see whether their students who are struggling have word level deficits and whether they're at high risk, some risk, or if they're proficient. And that helps teachers and administrators know where to put their resources. And you'll notice on this graph with grade 2 and 3, the proficient children for automatic word recognition are higher than for grade 4. And grade 4 has many more children at risk than either one of those other grades. So this pattern that we see here, we're seeing it across many districts, and we've begun the conversations with lots of teachers to try to figure out what is missing and how this disrupted instruction and practice, what it compromised, and how we need to think about these issues. Obviously, acquisition of phonemic awareness, decoding and encoding skills was impacted. Also, generalizing those skills to connected text. They weren't there to practice. Automatic word recognition, which is essential to fluency, has not been developing in many of these students, and they've not been able to practice, or they weren't able to practice in a variety of contexts, including with their peers, and they missed out on a lot of the in-classroom schedules and routines. So to realize real recovery, we have to get these youngsters to grade level reading comprehension. But think about, and at the top of this chart is just during the years of kindergarten to 4th grade, there's a lot of learning that has to happen with foundational learning skills, from phonemic awareness, the alphabetic principle, phonics. And if these are in place, students, if they are in place in a way that they can automatically use that knowledge, they can get to fluency. That then opens a way for them to actually develop more knowledge and greater skills by reading to get that information and not just depending on the spoken language. But gaps in these word level reading skills must be addressed before they can develop automaticity. So if you think about what has been perturbed in their phonics to fluency journey, just imagine they're in kindergarten and learning these very, very basic foundational skills, and they go home. Maybe some of them had them well in place. Maybe some of them were still developing them, but they lost all opportunity to practice those last several months of school, which is really, really important for those kindergarten kids to get that instantiated. So when they come back to first grade, they are able to use that. So then you can imagine them coming in as first graders, not having those skills well instantiated, or maybe huge gaps still, and then not being able to be at the right grade level. By the time they move over to third and fourth grade, these are teachers who aren't typically used to building those very foundational skills, and they have gaps in those foundational skills. And that's keeping them from getting to higher vocabulary, more complicated syntax, background knowledge. The whole system is shut down if they don't have word reading accuracy. Typically, that's taught by teachers through explicit instruction. Remember, during the pandemic, we had to shift a lot of time and attention to computers without that feedback. So the good news, and this is more work from Sean Reardon at Stanford, the good news is students got back in school and they did resume learning. The problem is they're learning at the same pace. We can't catch them up to grade level unless we do something different. And it's been suggested, a lot of work has come from Brown University as well. A major increase in instructional time has to somehow be worked into the schedule. They recommend summer school, extended day, tutoring, or we have to get more efficient learning using different approaches. It is our great belief and understanding that we must have more effective tools and solutions to meet the urgent needs of these students even before the pandemic, but it is even more urgent now. And we can use existing learning models from the science of learning to accelerate the impact of instruction. Very quickly, making learning stick occurs when effective and efficient practice is driven by learning science. There have been 50 years studied to understand how we go from acquisition of information to retaining it, retrieving it, generalizing it, and moving to automaticity. And we know that many students, when they come in, the instructional principles from reading science to develop that knowledge, it's best taught early on with teachers and then supplemented. Many of those students will jump right into being able to use independent practice to develop into expert readers. But we know that there are a large number of students who are at risk, who simply can't do it without more structured practice. And we can use learning principles to provide that practice. And furthermore, we can leverage technology to personalize it and bring those principles to life. Structured practice is essential for many at-risk students, and using that structured practice to build automatic word recognition actually crosses this gap. It moves us from explicit instruction to independent practice, and it fills in the automatic word recognition skills that are essential to get to fluency, which is essential to use comprehension for meaning in connected text. So at this point, I'm going to shift it to Heather.
There we go. Hey, everybody. Carolyn, thank you very much. That was all great information. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about some of the ways that we have kind of rethought how to meet the needs of our kids here at LaSalle Catholic. One thing to keep in mind is I am principal of a preschool through fourth grade building. So it's a little bit different than most elementaries. Many elementaries around me are kindergarten through fifth grade. So it's a little bit different. We have 20 students in a class. We have capped our students at that to ensure that we are able to have one teacher per 20 students. And then our student population here, we have a very interesting population. We have a growing immigrant population here in our area of Cedar Rapids. We have quite a few families that are coming to us from Africa. We also have a good, hardworking middle class families that attend here. So we have a wide range of families and students here. We have altogether about 230 students when you include preschool as well. So I do oversee preschool through fourth grades and all of the curriculum and whatnot with that. So when it comes to reading, we had found over the last few years of COVID that fourth grade class in kindergarten, it really impacted them having to shut down the last 3 months of school. We real quick, just like everybody else, pivoted to doing some hybrid learning online. But as I've said with our population, we have quite a few students who didn't have internet access at home. They didn't have access to devices. And therefore, we were trying to do a little bit of pre-recorded lessons sent out to families via email, via Seesaw. We tried to do just a wide variety of things, not up to snuff with what our expectations are for families and for our kids learning. But we did what we could with the situation we had. Then the very next year, some schools stayed online. We opted to do a hybrid in-person and online option. Families had the choice if they wanted to do online. We were able to provide hotspots to families, provide them devices to make sure that they had the stuff that they needed, and we dropped off curriculum items at their houses so that they had everything that they needed. We created a schedule for when their kids would pop into Zoom. We ensured that that was during direct instruction. That way they had time to be in direct instruction and so that they could participate with the class in that manner. Some families opted to have their kids be on Zoom all day. With our younger students, that was difficult. They have a hard time sitting still as it is in the classroom, let alone sitting on a device for 7 hours in a day. So we really tried to break it up, and we updated our schedule so that they would have like a chunk in the morning and then a chunk again in the afternoon. Direct instruction for math and reading were our big focuses there. But we still found that it was just different than having the kids in the building with us. We had quite a few students who were here with us. I think only about 10% of our students opted to be hybrid that year. And it was just a lot of extra work for our teachers. So the following year, 2 years later, we decided we're not going to do the hybrid option. We're going to require that all students come in person. We were finding that our students who opted to do the hybrid, when we did our screeners and our diagnostic assessments on them, they were well below grade level because they hadn't been in the classroom doing direct instruction and practice with their teachers. So we made sure to really push them forward so that we could work on their academics and make sure that we were working on rebuilding their social emotional learning and their self-confidence in the classroom, because they just hadn't been here for a while. So when it came to the plan for that, the first thing we had to do, I sat down with my learning strategist and we started to rethink our schedule. We wanted to make sure that students were getting more with direct instruction in the classroom, more literacy time, because our scores were not where we wanted them to be, especially with that 4th grade group. And they still are quite a bit lower than we would like them to be. We're seeing growth, but we still want to keep pushing that envelope and keep our expectations high with them. So the first step we made was changing our schedule. We aligned that both. So in my building, I have 2 sections of every grade level, kinder through 4th grade. So I aligned their reading time at the same time, their math time at the same time, their small group reading rotations and small group math rotations all at the same time. So both kindergarten classrooms are doing whole group reading at the same time. They're doing small group reading at the same time. And we did that in 2 parts. One, to ensure that the teachers have common time together, but also to ensure that my learning strategists and our title teachers, our additional resource teachers, had time to go in and either do the push-in model for intervention supports, or they could do pull-out, but during that same time, so that we're not pulling kids during direct instruction, but rather we're utilizing our small group time for their extra interventions. So we had to make sure that we were doubling down on what kids need to be in which tiers. We had to utilize not just our FAST data, but this year we also have our word flight screening data to help us to delineate which kids fall into which tiers. So we use that data to help us direct our instruction. And in doing so, we had added into the schedule a double block for our teachers who have a special. We double blocked them so that they have a built-in time. Once a week, we meet and have data meetings where we discuss progress monitoring data. We discuss intervention supports, not just for academics, but also for behaviors and social emotional learning across the board. But we meet weekly to discuss that and see where we're at, what we're doing, double check our numbers, our data. Maybe a kid all of a sudden has a tough week. We want to make sure that we're talking about that kid so that we can make sure that we can double dip them, as I like to say. They're not just getting intervention support from our resource teachers, but they're getting their tier 1 intervention support during small group reading in the classroom too. And that's the biggest piece that we had to make sure that we were doing, was that tier 1 intervention for those 80% of kids who are getting it. But then we have our tier 2s and our tier 3 ready to go too, so that we can double dip and sometimes triple dip, depending on if our students are ELs as well. Our groupings are flexible. Students don't stay in a group all year long. If they're making adequate progress at a skill that their diagnostic screener showed that they needed extra support in, then they are working on that skill. Once they've reached proficiency in that skill, they get to move into a different group, and or we look at data from all sorts of kids. So like maybe that kid, then they'd move on to the next building block. And then they're working on that in their intervention, but they're getting an intervention support from their classroom teacher and or possibly our title support, our reading resource, or learning interventionist.
And Heather, before you go on, as we've observed and you and I have talked, I mean, you have very clear outcome expectations that you set with all of the students in this partnership. I mean, the students, the teachers, but what is interesting to me is this finding that parents, 90% of parents think their students are reading at grade level, especially in this cohort where everyone is so far behind.
Mhm.
They just assume because they're like their peers that they're okay and they're on grade level. And there's a big push right now in some of the studies and the literature that's coming out to get the parents' expectations set appropriately. So they're part of the solution here
Mhm.
in making sure. And I know that you have a variety of ways that you're working on getting practice at home and getting parents engaged. I wondered
Mhm.
if you could take 1 minute and just talk about that. I think just that finding that so many parents don't realize that their students are struggling at
Mhm.
the grade level expectation.
Yeah, of course. We decided to rethink two different parts of our literacy programming, spelling and homework. We don't call homework anymore. It's called practice. So we are a standards-based grading school. We utilize we have priority standards that we are focused on, and we instead of sending home like a math sheet or a reading, extra fluency reading, we make sure that it's hitting on the standard, but it's also hitting on the skill that that kid needs to work on. So in regards to spelling, instead of it just being like a set of 10 words or 20 words, we are focusing on a skill like a CVC or a CVCE skill, specifically in our younger grades. And then in our older grades, we're utilizing different skill-based lists as well, because we want them not only to have extra practice in that whole group, they get the whole group lesson, but now they're also getting extra practice in their small groups, working, whether it's independently with a teacher, with a resource teacher, but then their practice that they're taking home is also focused on that skill. So they're getting multiple opportunities to work on that skill throughout their day and throughout their week to make sure that they are also having that practice, but then the teacher has multiple avenues of data to see if that student is where they need to be and if they need to do some reteaching. We do that also in math. So like, for example, if a math sheet gets sent home, I have a daughter in 3rd grade. She brought home a math sheet just the other day. She only had to do questions 1 and 5 because those were the questions that were related to the skill that they were focused on in the classroom. And that was the skill that's going to be graded in their report card on their progress reports with their standards. So they only had to do their practice for that. And getting kids and parents to change their thinking on how we go about homework, because they'll still call it homework, but really it's practice. We're practicing on getting better at this skill so that we can continue to work and grow as we are going. We are very growth focused in this building. The state has a lot of requirements that they want us to meet, and we are going to work very hard towards those. But we set goals with kids from where they're at the beginning of the year, and we set small goals for them to work at and attain. And our teachers do a lot with making sure that they're plotting their data along the way so the kids can celebrate those successes along the way as they're going. So, I mean, we're doing a lot of that and trying to make sure that the kids are always focused on how they're growing. They might not be at grade level, and that's okay. And that's what we're seeing with our 4th graders. They're not quite there yet. We're seeing growth. We would love to see bigger growth, and that's where we're utilizing Word Flight this year to help us with that. A little bit more in our older grades. We're not just using it for 4th grade, but we're using it through 8th grade here at LaSalle Catholic. So we're really trying to make sure that we're hitting on those building blocks that those kids were missing, because we are finding that there's some decoding issues that they have to have before they can reach fluency. And some of our kids just haven't quite gotten there yet. And it's been a slow go because they missed that in kindergarten. And then they were a little bit behind in 1st grade. And then it's just been a domino effect. It's really slowed their learning down about 3 months. They've been behind their grade level essentially for a 3-month gap.
Yep.
some kids, they get it and it's quick and it clicks for them. It's our kids who are a bit lower and don't have the extra resources or parent support at home that we're still finding are struggling. So here, I just talked about celebrating successes. We try to do little wins with the kids at all times. It's not just, oh, you did great on this test, and then we wait 4 weeks and, oh, you did great on this test. We're trying to celebrate wins and growth with them as often as possible. So maybe every day, every other day, once a week. We're doing a lot with that, making sure the kids feel good about being at school and they want to be at school and they feel really good about their learning. So if you stepped in our building, you would find that we have a very fun, friendly, and team-oriented, goal-minded faculty and student body. They're all very, very much wanting to work together, make sure we're helping each other succeed. So it's not just, I'm going to work on me, but how can I help my classmate? How can I help my teammate? How can I help my colleague, so that we can make sure that our kids and our staff are doing the best that they can for that student growth. Here on this one, we talked about building on reciprocal roles of instruction and practice. Along with that, one of the fun things that we did in our schedule was trying to figure out where could our specials teachers, when they have gaps in their day, how could they also help with some reading intervention support with students. We want reading intervention supports to be short and sweet. So like, for example, our PE teacher or our music teacher, they might have like an hour in their day where they can go classroom to classroom and they can pull kids and do some one-on-one or two-on-one instruction with them as well. So that was part of our schedule to make sure that we have that in place. Building partnerships. So with the part that I haven't talked about is the realistic expectations for parents. We send out to our parents our expectations for our building, what our academic expectations are for their students and what that looks like and what that might sound like throughout the year. And then we really hit on that hard every day. We make sure that if parents, we want them to be a partner with their kids. They're their first teacher in our mind, and we're their second teacher. So we want to make sure that they also are taking a guided interest in their students' learning, and we want to make sure that they are able to build on that. We have some families, EL families, so we do enlist help with interpreters to help with that. We do we dual language a lot of our stuff. We do a lot in French and a lot in English to make sure that our families are getting all the information they can. We have some families who we do Haitian Creole for them or Swahili. It just depends on the family and what language they need, but we will put a lot of stuff in different languages for them as well. We have Friday folders for our younger kids, but daily folders every day for our older students and agendas. We require parents to sign them so that we can make sure that they are taking an extra interest in their students' learning and what practice work they have for at home. And then we also have families listed into Seesaw so that we can communicate with them on multiple places and multiple avenues. Families also, we utilize Remind and email a lot with our families as well. So that way we can communicate on multiple fronts. They're not just going to get it digitally. They're going to get a hard copy of everything as well. That way they have multiple pieces of communication, but that way they can help as much as possible. Reading every night is a requirement for every grade level. For our younger grade levels, that might mean that mom and dad have to read to them, or they read a leveled reader to grandma and grandpa. And we talk to the kids about how they can do that via FaceTime. They could do that They could read to their pillow. They could read to their stuffed animals. They can have their parents read with them. We send recordings of books home with students so they can listen to reading and follow the book along as well. So we just want to make sure that they have multiple opportunities to be able to do the work that we're asking them to do as well. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer questions about how we do things here at LaSalle. I'm also happy to share anything. I'd be happy to share our schedule, what it looks like. I could Zoom with you if you'd like to talk about how to revamp things, but I'm happy to answer any and all questions.
So one question, Heather, is how long did it take you to get buy-in from the teachers to actually, I mean, you're taking on several, you yourself as the principal, I know we had to make sure we did a Zoom on Wednesday because you teach on Thursday or run some small group. So
yeah,
how long and did you have resistance, or how did you build the culture to get everyone to take more responsibility and become more collaborative?
So one of the things I'm blessed with is that I have an amazing team. We all pretty much sat down together and knew that this was an issue. COVID was an issue that we all had to work through together. And so we took the team approach to it. I'm not sitting in my office all day, dawdling, typing on my computer, emailing, making phone calls. I'm also in the classroom helping as much as I can too. We are short-staffed this year. We don't have a music teacher, so I help teach music to 2nd and 4th grade once a week when our long-term sub cannot. But then I also jump in and help do intervention groups with students as well. So we took the team approach. My team, we do everything collaboratively. I don't make unilateral decisions. We meet once a week. We talk through everything, and then we make decisions together for what's best for the kids. We make sure that that's always at the focus of our conversations. We don't want to have decisions being made that aren't in the best interest of the kids. So we always are constantly talking about, well, will this work? Is this what's best for our kids? Is this what's going to work for our families? One of the nice things about our building is that everybody knows everybody. So all the kids, even if it's a kindergartner and you have a 4th grade teacher, that 4th grade teacher knows who that kindergartner is. We talk to the kids in the hallways. We greet them at the door when they first walk in. We say their name. I know every single kid in this building. I know every staff member. I know what they do outside of school, which is fun. And I think building the relationships has really been something that's been super beneficial and helpful with these kids, and getting them excited to be at school and wanting to stay here and continue growing in their learning. And we are genuinely interested in their lives, which is even better, because then they get excited to share with us what's going on outside of school, what's going on in their families. They want to share their success with us. I have students who, if I happen to be in my office, or if they see me in the hallway, they want to show me how they did on their work. They want to come and read to me. And I'm always open to that. And that's one of the things our team is really good about too. We saw this crisis happening. We knew we had to get ahead of it. And so the buy-in really for me, it was real quick. They just knew we have to do something. We got to do what's best for the kids, and we're going to do what we can. Adding the specials to intervention support, our classroom teachers, we're so grateful to have that, because we are a smaller Catholic school, so we don't have paras in the classroom. It's our teacher and our kids, and that's it. The only classrooms that do have paras are our preschools, and that's because we're a DHS regulated school. So we're required to have a para depending on what the ratio levels are. So we have to have so many adults in those rooms. Whereas I would love to have paras in kindergarten and 1st grade. That would be really fun goal for me if I could financially, but unfortunately we just don't have that option at this time. So the buy-in was super quick and super simple on my part. But I also, like I said, I have an amazing team. So they're willing to jump in and do whatever we can.
Yeah, that is wonderful. That is a real sign of leadership, though, that you can persuade them to change their schedules. And, it is what you have to do to just address the problems. I think also in your school, the observation that, and I'm sure it's the same for math, but for us, we see the literacy being just out there, so important to everyone to acknowledge how they're coming along with the simplest task and skills all the way up to reading a book with your grandparent. I mean, it seems to have taken on a real important, big-sized role. And I think that's a message that, it is important. It's so important to get that the early reading in place early and well. So I think that's, I see another questions come in. Let me just, this is a question, Heather. What did the word flight screener tell you that your other screener did not? How did you use that data, or what did it tell you?
So here in Cedar Rapids, we use the FAST screener as that's our statewide screener that we have to do 3 times a year. That's our first screener that we did. A couple weeks later, we used Word Flight. We screened all of our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade students. And one discrepancy that we noticed was that kids that were being deemed proficient in FAST were being marked as not super low, but like they were in the yellow. And so that told us that there's something that wasn't being caught on our FAST screener that was being caught on our Word Flight screener. So what we did with those kiddos is we then moved them into the diagnostic assessment, which gave us a better breakdown of what building blocks those kiddos were missing, so that when the Word Flight actual program gets started, it can start right where their first building block is that they need to work towards their fluency. And that gave us a little bit more information too about what intervention supports we need to do outside of the classroom with those kiddos, because it might be a kiddo that's a bubbler. So I call the kids who meet proficiency on FAST, but might not make it for the winter screening or the spring screening. Sorry. Those are our bubble kids. So those are the kids who will likely make adequate growth, but they're the ones that we got to really make sure we keep our eye on, and we're working with them also so that they don't fall between the cracks.
Yeah.
The Word Flight data gave us more information for those kids who were on the lower end too. It gave us a deeper breakdown of that. And then we have an additional diagnostic screener that we utilize here in our building. It's more of a paper pencil type screener, but once it told us what building block they're missing, then we could do our additional diagnostic screener on just that skill to see if there's another breakdown within that skill that they're missing as well. And then my learning strategist, she uses that data to form her tier 3 intervention supports for those kids.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you. Let's see. Looks like if we have another question here. Do the students themselves know what the goals are when they're working in Word Flight?
So within Word Flight, the program itself, it looks like a game. I would call it like a mix between Prodigy and Mario. They have like a world that they go to, and then within each of those worlds, they have different levels that they have to work through. And it's very specific to that kid. So like if I'm working on it and Carolyn's working on it also at the same time, we both click on level 1, it will have very different things that we're working on because it's built for that kid. It doesn't necessarily tell them what their skill is that they're working on per se. You would find that out as you're working through it. The teacher view gives you more information for where the kids are at and how they're doing within word flight. It breaks it down more, and it'll actually send the teachers emails when kids get flagged, so then they can double check on that kid specifically to see, well, what was it they got flagged on? What were they doing? And it'll kind of lean into, was the kid rushing through it? Were they not taking their time? Is it a skill that I need to hit on a little bit harder in the classroom or with our interventions support as well? So it gives the teacher a lot more information on that aspect. And then on my end, as the administrator, I can see all the kids, but the teacher end gives more information. My administrator gives me more of an overview of what's going on.
I think we're just about to close, unless anybody has a last question to enter into the Q&A. There are a couple, if we didn't get them all answered, we will answer them and send them out. I think both our emails are here if people want to reach out and learn more and communicate in any way, please do that. The other thing that we'll be doing is emailing you with the recording of the webinar, and we'll send you an opportunity if you want to sign up for the free screener, if you have children that you're wondering about whether or not they are actually proficient in automatic word recognition, not just some of the basic decoding skills. As you said before, it differentiates that in a different way for teachers, so they can see what additional help that they might need, or that they don't have the skills in a way that they can really use them efficiently. And that's what we're all trying to do, especially with these COVID kids, is get them as many opportunities and practice sets as possible so that they can generalize that information. Heather, it was a pleasure to spend an hour with you, as always, and I look forward to checking in and learning how your school is doing. And I love telling your stories about just making literacy like key from the moment they walk in the morning until they go to sleep at night. And I think it's a great testament to your commitment for each one of those children to become a great reader. So,
thank you. Yeah, thanks you guys for having me. And like I said, there's my email, so feel free to reach out if you have any other questions.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. We'll be ending the webinar now. Hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.